He flicked a single crumbled dollar bill into my face in the middle of a crowded bar and said, "Here, soldier boy, buy yourself a personality." The worst part wasn't the humiliation. It was watching my girlfriend of 7 years pick it up, laugh, and walk out the door with him. He thought because I was quiet, I was weak. He thought his Rolex and his loud voice made him untouchable. But he made one critical mistake. He didn't know I spent 6 years in Army signals intelligence. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a punch. I picked up that dollar, went home, and opened my laptop. By the time I was done with him, he didn't just lose his job, he lost his freedom. If you want to see how a silent operator dismantles a loud narcissist without ever raising his voice, you need to hear this story. In my line of work, survival depends on the ability to distinguish a signal from the noise. I spent 6 years in Army signals intelligence, sitting in windowless rooms in varying degrees of desert heat, listening to the static of the world to find the one frequency that mattered. Now, as a cybersecurity analyst for a mid-tier fintech firm in Seattle, my battlefield is digital. But the discipline remains the same. Monitor the baseline, identify anomalies, and neutralize threats before they breach the perimeter. For the last 6 months, my relationship with Jenna had become nothing but noise. It was Friday night. The rain was hammering against the glass of our apartment in Belltown. It was a sensible apartment, clean, secure, and within our budget. I was sitting at the kitchen island, reviewing a firewall log on my laptop. Jenna was on the sofa, bathed in the artificial blue glow of her phone, scrolling through Instagram. I could hear the aggressive tapping of her acrylic nails against the screen. It was a rhythm of dissatisfaction. "Alex," she said, not looking up, "we are going out." It was not a question. It was a directive. "I have a deployment scheduled for midnight, Jenna. System maintenance," I replied, keeping my voice even. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were cold, scanning me like I was a piece of outdated hardware she regretted purchasing. "You always have maintenance. You always have a reason to stay inside this box." "My friends are at the vault. Tyler Blake is going to be there. He can actually help you network, Alex. He is a regional director. He makes things happen." I knew the name, Tyler Blake. She had mentioned him 3 times in the last week. A high-value individual, according to her new vocabulary. I looked at Jenna, the woman I had planned to propose to, the woman I had supported while she finished her marketing degree. I saw the resentment in her posture. She looked at my stability and saw stagnation. She looked at my discipline and saw boredom. "Fine," I said. I closed the laptop. "Let us go." The vault was exactly the kind of environment I avoided. It was a sensory assault designed to simulate luxury. The lighting was low, the bass was heavy enough to rattle the ribcage, and the air smelled of expensive cologne and desperate ambition. We navigated through the crowd, Jenna leading the way, her posture shifting the moment we crossed the threshold. She stood straighter. She smiled at strangers. She was broadcasting availability. We found the booth in the VIP section. It was crowded with people who looked like they were auditioning for a life they could not afford. And in the center of it, holding court, was Tyler Blake. He was a hostile actor. That was my immediate assessment. He wore a suit that cost more than my first car, unbuttoned just enough to show a heavy gold chain. He was loud, occupying more physical space than necessary, his arms spread across the back of the leather booth. "Jenna," he shouted, ignoring the other conversations. He did not stand up. He just pointed a finger at her like he was selecting a product. "Get over here." "And who is this?" "The bodyguard." Jenna laughed. It was a high, nervous sound I did not recognize. "This is Alex," she said, sliding into the booth next to him. She left me standing in the aisle. "Alex, the boyfriend," Tyler said, looking me up and down. He smirked. "Jenna says you are in computers, cybersecurity," I corrected, keeping my hands clasped in front of me. "And formerly Army intelligence." Tyler laughed, a barking sound that made the people around him smile reflexively. "Intelligence, huh? So you are the guy listening to my phone calls? Tell me, soldier, does that pay the bills? Because looking at your jacket, I am guessing the government does not pay for Italian wool." The table erupted in laughter. Jenna laughed with them. She did not look at me. She looked at Tyler's Rolex. I felt a spike in my heart rate, a physiological response to confrontation. I breathed in through my nose, suppressing it. "Hold position. It pays enough," I said calmly. I prefer stability over flash. Stability, Tyler mocked, pouring vodka into Jenna's glass without asking her. Stability is a word poor people use to feel better about being boring. In my world, Alex, we hunt. We eat what we kill. I closed a $2 million contract today. What did you do? Reset a password. The disrespect was calculated. He was engaging in a public dominance display, marking his territory. He wanted me to react. He wanted the angry ex-soldier to start a fight so he could play the victim and have security throw me out. I would not give him the satisfaction. I am going to get a drink at the bar, I said, turning away. I spent 20 minutes nursing a club soda, watching them from a distance. I watched Tyler's hand drift to Jenna's shoulder. I watched her lean into him, whispering in his ear. I watched the way she looked at him, with a hunger she used to save for me. The pattern was clear. The data was conclusive. The relationship was a compromised asset. I walked back to the table to initiate the extraction. Jenna, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. We are leaving. Tyler looked up, his eyes glassy with alcohol and arrogance. He stopped smiling. Leaving? We are just getting started, soldier boy. Why do you not sit down? Learn something about success. We are done here, I said to Jenna. Let's go. Jenna looked at me, then at Tyler. The hesitation lasted 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, 7 years of history evaporated. You go, Alex, she said, her voice sharp. I am having fun. For once. Tyler grinned. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick roll of cash. He peeled off a single $1 bill. He did not hand it to me. He crumpled it slightly, aimed and flicked it. The bill hit me squarely in the face. It fluttered down, brushing against my cheek like a dead leaf, and landed on the sticky floor between my boots. The silence at the table was instant. The music seemed to fade into a dull thrum. For the valet, Tyler said, his voice dropping to a sneer. Or for your Uber, since you obviously cannot afford to be here. Go home, little man. I stood there. The humiliation was a physical weight, heavy and hot in my chest. Every instinct trained into me during basic training screamed at me to strike. I knew exactly where to hit him to shatter his jaw. I could end him before his expensive bodyguards realized I had moved. But I did not move. I looked at Jenna. She was not looking at me. She was picking up her glass, her eyes fixed on the table, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. She had chosen. I exhaled slowly, purging the emotion from my system. I engaged the protocol. Cold logic. Slowly, deliberately, I crouched down. I did not look away from Tyler. I reached out and picked up the dollar bill from the floor. It was dirty, stained with someone's spilled drink. I stood up. I folded the bill neatly, pressing the crease with my thumb and forefinger. I placed it into my front pocket. Understood, I said. My voice was terrifyingly calm, even to my own ears. I turned my back on them. I walked out of the VIP section, through the sweating crowd, and out into the cold Seattle rain. I did not slam the door. I did not send a text. I walked 3 miles back to the apartment. Inside, the silence was different now. It was no longer heavy. It was tactical. I took the wet dollar bill out of my pocket and placed it on my desk next to my keyboard. I sat down and stared at George Washington's face. I was not sad. The grief had been cauterized by the disrespect. My pulse was steady at 60 beats per minute. The relationship was dead. Jenna was gone. But Tyler Blake? Tyler Blake had just made a fatal error. He thought he had paid me to leave. In reality, he had just given me the first piece of evidence. I opened my laptop. The screen illuminated the dark room. I opened a new terminal window. A blinking cursor waited for my command. Operation initialized. The apartment was silent. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that usually follows the detonation of a bomb. Jenna had not returned. Her closet was still full. Her toothbrush was still in the bathroom, but the energy in the room had shifted. The sector was compromised. I sat at my desk, the only piece of furniture in the house that truly belonged to me. It was a custom-built setup, 3 monitors, a mechanical keyboard, and a hardwired connection to a secure server. In the center of the desk, under the stark white light of a halogen lamp, lay the $1 bill. It was wrinkled. It smelled faintly of stale beer and expensive cologne. It was a physical manifestation of disrespect. I reached into my drawer and pulled out a small plastic evidence bag, a remnant from my time in the service. I slid the dollar bill inside, sealed it, and taped it to the corner of my monitor. I did not view it as a souvenir. I viewed it as a mission objective. It was the why. Now, I needed to construct the how. In the military, we are trained to compartmentalize. You do not process grief while you are under fire. You take the pain, you shove it into a mental box, you lock the box, and you focus on the reticle. I felt a burning sensation in my chest, the betrayal, the image of Jenna laughing as she walked away, but I forced my breathing to slow. I visualized a firewall engaging, blocking the emotional traffic. I opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life. I did not need to hack Tyler Blake. Hacking is loud. Hacking leaves footprints. Hacking is illegal. I did not need to break the law to destroy him. I only needed to look at what he had voluntarily shown the world. We call it OSINT, open source intelligence. In the modern age, ego is the greatest vulnerability. Men like Tyler Blake do not just live their lives. They broadcast them. They leave a trail of digital exhaust so thick you can choke on it. I started with the basics. LinkedIn. Tyler Blake, Regional Sales Director at Virotech Medical Solutions. I scanned his profile. It was a monument to corporate narcissism. Top performer 2023. President's Club. Disruptor. He had posted a photo 3 days ago, a wrist shot of a Patek Philippe Nautilus watch with the caption, "Time is money and business is booming. Number grind set, number sales beast." I opened a second tab and searched for the watch model. Retail price, $120,000. I checked his salary range on Glassdoor for a regional sales director in the medical device sector. Base salary, $150,000. Commission, variable. Even if he was the best salesman in the company, the math did not align. You do not buy a watch worth 80% of your base salary unless you have family money or you have an auxiliary income stream. I began to build a timeline. I pulled up his Instagram, which was public. Of course it was public. He wanted to be seen. I cross-referenced his posts with his LinkedIn updates. Post 1, March 12th. Location, Las Vegas. Caption, closing massive deals at the Western Health Summit. Post 2, May 15th. Location, Miami. Caption, client appreciation dinner. The hustle never stops. I opened a third monitor. I accessed the public records for the Western Health Summit. Tyler was not listed as a speaker. Virotech was not listed as a sponsor. I checked the attendee list from a leaked marketing database I had archived years ago. His name was absent. So where was he actually? I looked at the background of the Las Vegas photo. It was not a conference center. It was the balcony of a penthouse suite at the Cosmopolitan. In the reflection of his sunglasses, I zoomed in. There was a document on the table. It was too blurry to read the text, but I could see a logo. It was a blue triangle. I ran a reverse image search on the logo. Nothing. I adjusted the contrast and sharpness. I ran it again. It matched a small limited liability company registered in Nevada, Apex Strategic Consulting. I navigated to the Nevada Secretary of State Business Search Portal. I typed in Apex Strategic Consulting. Status, active. Registered agent, a corporate filing service in Carson City. Manager, TB Holdings, LLC. A shell company inside a shell company. This was tradecraft. It was clumsy, but it was intentional. Tyler was not just a salesman. He was moving money. My phone vibrated on the desk. It was a text message from Jenna. "Alex, I am sorry about how tonight ended. But you have to understand. I need someone who operates at a higher level. Tyler has vision. You are just safe. I will come get my things tomorrow. Please do not make it difficult." I read the words. I felt the sharp stab of rejection, the phantom pain of a severed limb. She called me safe as an insult. She did not understand that safety is the result of rigorous risk management. She was trading security for volatility. I did not reply. I did not type out a paragraph of angry text. I simply took a screenshot of the message and saved it to a folder labeled context. Then, I turned the phone face down. Back to the screen. I had a name, Apex Strategic Consulting. I needed a transaction. I switched to a public government procurement database. Since Virotech sold medical devices, they likely dealt with hospitals receiving Medicare or Medicaid funding. That meant transparency laws applied. I searched for Virotech contracts in Nevada during the month of March, the same time Tyler was in Las Vegas. There was a contract. Virotech sold 12 MRI guidance systems to a private hospital chain in Henderson. Value, $4 million. Then, I searched for Apex Strategic Consulting and the vendor payments of that same hospital chain. My heart rate slowed. The world narrowed down to a single line of data. Vendor, Apex Strategic Consulting. Service, implementation and training fees. Amount, $200,000. Date, March 14th. The pattern locked into place. It was a classic kickback scheme. Tyler sells the equipment through his legitimate employer, Virotech. Then, he forces the hospital to hire his shell company, Apex, for consulting or training that likely never happens. He pockets the consulting fee tax-free or funnels it back to the hospital administrator who approved the deal. He was double-dipping. He was defrauding his company and likely violating the anti-kickback statute. I sat back in my chair. The darkness of the room felt protective now. Tyler Blake was not a successful businessman. He was a criminal liability. He was walking around with a felony on his wrist and a federal indictment waiting in his bank account. And Jenna? She had just boarded a sinking ship. I looked at the dollar bill on my monitor. Target acquired, I whispered to the empty room. I created a new encrypted directory on my hard drive. I named it Project Karma. I began to download everything. The digital world has a surface, and it has a bedrock. The surface is what normal people see. Google results, LinkedIn profiles, the polite fiction of corporate websites. The bedrock is where the truth lives. To get there, you have to be willing to navigate the gray zone. It was 0300 hours. The only light in my apartment came from the monitors, casting a sterile, bluish-white pallor over the room. My coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. I was no longer operating within the safe confines of public Google searches. I had crossed into the deep water accessing cached archives of leaked corporate data, breach compilations from the dark web, and aggressive public record aggregators that require specific credentials to query. I was hunting. I had established that Tyler Blake was living beyond his means. Now I needed to understand the mechanics of his engine. I pulled up the financial filings for the hospital chain in Henderson that had paid Tyler's shell company, Apex Strategic Consulting. I cross-referenced their billing codes with Medicare reimbursement data, which is public if you know how to parse the massive, unformatted text files the government dumps online. The pattern emerged at 0342 hours. It was subtle, buried in thousands of lines of code, but to a signal analyst, it was as loud as a siren. It was a classic upcoding scheme, layered with a kickback loop. Here is how the machine worked. Tyler, acting as the regional director for Virotech, was pushing a specific line of cardiac monitoring devices to these hospitals. The devices were standard mid-tier tech. However, the billing codes submitted to Medicare were for advanced, high-frequency monitoring systems equipment that cost 4 times as much. The hospital would bill the government for the premium device. The government, overwhelmed and bureaucratic, would pay. The hospital would pay Virotech for the standard device. The difference, the fat, was pure profit for the corrupt hospital administrators. But why would Tyler do this? He does not own the hospital. That is where Apex Strategic Consulting came in. I traced the flow of money. Every time the hospital placed a bulk order for these upcoded devices, a consulting fee was wired to Apex within 48 hours. Tyler was not just a salesman, he was the architect. He was teaching these administrators how to cheat the federal government, and in exchange, they were paying him a commission through his shell company. He was stealing tax dollars, money meant for grandmother's hip surgery or a veteran's dialysis, to fund his life of leased luxury cars and bottle service. I felt a cold wave of disgust wash over me. This was not victimless, this was parasitic. I minimized the spreadsheet and opened a browser window. I navigated to Jenna's Instagram profile. She had posted a photo an hour ago. It was a close-up of a new handbag, a Yves Saint Laurent clutch, black leather with the gold logo. It was sitting on a white tablecloth next to a plate of oysters. Caption: Date night with a man who knows how to treat a woman. Finally living the life I deserve. Number level up, number blessed. I looked at the bag. Retail price, $2,000, $500. I look back at my spreadsheet. A single fraudulent billing cycle for a cardiac patient generated approximately $3,000 in excess profit. The math was brutal and absolute. Tyler had effectively stolen money from a sick patient's care fund to buy Jenna a leather accessory. I stared at her photo. A month ago, seeing her with him would have broken my heart. Now, looking at that bag, I felt nothing but a clinical detachment. She was no longer my girlfriend. She was a beneficiary of a federal crime. She was enjoying the fruits of a felony. In the eyes of the law, she was inching dangerously close to being an accessory. She thought she was leveling up. In reality, she was walking blindly into a blast radius. I opened my digital notebook and began to construct the link chart. I placed Tyler Blake at the center node. I drew a solid red line to Virotech, his legitimate cover. I drew a dotted line to Apex Strategic Consulting, his illicit vehicle. I drew connecting lines to 3 specific hospital administrators in Nevada and Arizona whose signatures appeared on the purchase orders. The network was clear. The motive was clear. But I needed the smoking gun. I needed a document that physically tied Tyler Blake to Apex. Right now, Apex was just a faceless LLC managed by a holding company. A good lawyer could argue Tyler had nothing to do with it. I went deeper. I accessed a database of leaked emails from a third-party logistics vendor that Virotech used. It was a long shot, a Hail Mary in football terms. I ran a script to search for any attachment containing the word Apex sent from a Virotech IP address. The script ran for 20 minutes. The fan on my laptop whirred aggressively. Ping. One result found. It was an email from 2 years ago. Tyler had been sloppy. He had sent an invoice to the logistics company for expedited shipping on a personal order, but he had accidentally attached the wrong PDF first, then quickly sent a correction. The deleted attachment was still in the server's cache. I downloaded the file. Invoice for Apex PDF. I opened it. It was an invoice from Apex Strategic Consulting, billed to a private clinic in Phoenix for market analysis. But that was not what mattered. What mattered was the bottom of the page. There, in black ink, was a signature. A wet signature, likely signed on a tablet and converted to PDF. Authorized by Tyler Blake, managing partner. He had signed his own name on a fraudulent invoice for his shell company. He had signed his own death warrant. I sat back, the adrenaline cooling into a focused, icy clarity. This document proved he was the owner of the shell company. It linked him directly to the kickbacks. It linked him to the fraud. I saved the file to 3 different encrypted drives. I backed it up to a secure cloud server. The sun was beginning to rise over the Seattle skyline, turning the rain-slicked streets a dull gray. My eyes burned, but my mind was sharp. I had him. I had the weapon. I had the ammunition. Now, I just needed to design the delivery system. I looked at the dollar bill on my monitor one last time. End of Phase 1, I said. Commencing Phase 2, Strike Package Assembly. Revenge is a clumsy concept. It implies emotion, impulsiveness, and a desire to inflict pain for the sake of pain. In the military, we do not seek revenge. We seek neutralization. When a threat is identified, you do not throw rocks at it. You coordinate air support, you cut off supply lines, and you ensure that when the dust settles, the target is no longer capable of operating. I spent 48 hours inside my apartment, building the weapon that would dismantle Tyler Blake. I called it a strike package. In modern warfare, you rarely hit a target with just one missile. You hit them with a synchronized volley designed to overwhelm their defenses from every angle. My desk was a command center. The evidence I had gathered, the bank transfers, the shell company registration, the upcoded billing records, and the damning PDF with his signature was spread across my screens. It was a chaotic mess of data. My job was to refine it into a narrative so clear that even a jury of 12 strangers could understand it in 5 minutes. I created 3 distinct digital payloads. Payload Alpha was for the Heavy Artillery, the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Inspector General, HHS, OIG. This is the federal body responsible for hunting down Medicare fraud. They do not care about extramarital affairs or bar fights. They care about stolen tax dollars. I compiled the financial spreadsheets showing the flow of money from the hospital to Tyler's shell company, Apex Strategic Consulting. I drafted a cover letter using precise legal terminology, flagging specific violations of the Anti-Kickback Statute and the False Claims Act. This wasn't a complaint, it was a roadmap for an indictment. Payload Bravo was for the internal assassins, the chief compliance officer at Virotech. Corporations are biological organisms. Their primary instinct is survival. As soon as Virotech realized one of their regional directors was running a side scheme that exposed them to federal liability, they would not defend him. They would amputate him. I attached the internal emails and the proof that Tyler was double-dipping on their contracts. This would ensure his immediate termination and the freezing of his assets. Payload Charlie was for the psychological impact. Sarah Jenkins, an investigative journalist for a major financial news outlet in Seattle. I had read her work. She specialized in exposing white-collar corruption. I prepared a dossier titled, "The High Cost of Healthcare: How One Sales Director Fleeced Taxpayers to Fund a Playboy Lifestyle." I included the photos from Tyler's Instagram, the watches, the suites, the champagne, and juxtaposed them with the dates of the fraudulent transactions. This would ensure that even if he avoided prison, his reputation would be incinerated. He would never work in this industry again. The weapon was built. Now, I needed to determine the time on target. I checked Tyler's LinkedIn one last time. There it was, posted 4 hours ago. A glossy digital flyer for the Virotech Annual Sales Excellence Gala. Tonight, 1,900 hours. The Grand Ballroom at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Tyler was set to receive the Sales Leader of the Year award. Jenna would be there. I could picture it perfectly. The black tie dress code, the crystal chandeliers, the applause as he walked on stage, smiling that arrogant smile, Jenna clapping in the front row, convinced she had bet on the winning horse. It was the perfect kill zone. I initiated the launch sequence. I did not send the emails from my home connection. That is amateur hour. So back if he have to said. Also www. I routed my traffic through a double VPN chain, bouncing the signal from a server in Panama to a node in Switzerland, and finally exiting through a public relay in Estonia. I used a burner email account created on an encrypted service hosted in a jurisdiction that ignores U.S. subpoenas. I opened the window for Payload Alpha. Send. I opened the window for Payload Bravo. Send. I opened the window for Payload Charlie. I added a short note. The climax of this story happens tonight at the Fairmont. You might want to be there. Send. The screen blinked. The data was airborne. The missiles were in flight. There was no abort button now. I closed my laptop. The fan spun down, and the room fell into a heavy silence. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me, like the quiet inside a cockpit before the wheels touch the tarmac. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I shaved slowly, watching my face in the mirror. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. The grief that had clouded my vision in the bar was gone, replaced by the cold certainty of the operator. I went to my closet. I did not own a tuxedo, and I certainly did not own Italian wool suits like Tyler. I pulled out my charcoal gray suit. It was off the rack, but I had paid a tailor to fit it properly. It was clean, sharp, and utilitarian. I put on a crisp white shirt and a dark navy tie. I polished my black Oxfords until they reflected the overhead light. I checked my reflection. I did not look like a heartbroken ex-boyfriend. I looked like an auditor. I looked like a man coming to balance the books. Finally, I walked back to my desk. I reached for the plastic evidence bag taped to the monitor. I peeled the tape back and took out the $1 bill. I held it for a moment, running my thumb over the wrinkled paper. It was lighter than I remembered. It was just a piece of cotton and linen blend, printed with green ink. But in the right context, it was a symbol. Tyler had used it to price me. He had decided my dignity was worth $1. Tonight, I would return the investment with interest. I folded the bill and slid it into the inside pocket of my suit jacket, directly over my heart. I grabbed my keys and walked out of the apartment. I did not look back at the empty space where Jenna's things used to be. The apartment was just a location. The past was just data. The only thing that mattered was the objective. I took the elevator down to the street. The rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and reflective under the streetlights. I hailed a cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The Fairmont Olympic," I said. "And do not rush." I want to arrive right on time. As the car pulled away from the curb, I checked my watch. 1,945 hours. The awards ceremony would be starting in 30 minutes. The emails would be landing in inboxes right now. Phones would be buzzing. The chain reaction had begun. I sat back in the dark leather seat and watched the city blur past the window. I was no longer Alex Carter, the guy who got dumped at a bar. I was the consequence. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Olympic was a study in excess. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen explosions from the gold leaf ceiling, casting a warm, flattering light on the 300 people below. The air was thick with the scent of prime rib, expensive perfume, and unearned confidence. To the average observer, it was a celebration of success. To me, it looked like a target-rich environment. I walked past the registration table with the confidence of someone who owned the building. Situational awareness is 90% of infiltration. If you look like you belong, people assume you do. I scanned the room, filtering out the static, the waiters, the generic guests, the background noise of a jazz quartet, and locked onto the primary target. Tyler Blake was standing near the center of the room, holding court. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo with a velvet lapel, a glass of champagne in one hand, gesturing wildly with the other. He looked like a man who believed he was untouchable. He was laughing at his own joke, his head thrown back, his teeth gleaming under the lights. Jenna stood next to him. She wore a silver floor-length gown that shimmered like mercury. She looked beautiful, undeniably so, but her posture was wrong. Her shoulders were tight, her smile was brittle. She was scanning the room nervously, her eyes darting around as if she sensed a shift in the atmospheric pressure. She was realizing that the high-value lifestyle came with a high-stress tax bracket. I adjusted my cuffs and began my approach. I moved through the crowd with a steady, predatory rhythm. I did not rush. The missile had already been fired. I was just there to witness the impact. I stopped 3 feet from them. The circle of sycophants around Tyler parted, sensing the intrusion. "Tyler," I said. My voice was low, cutting under the ambient noise. Tyler stopped mid-sentence. He turned, his eyes narrowing as he processed my presence. Confusion flickered across his face, followed immediately by a sneer. "Alex," he laughed, a loud, incredulous bark. "What are you doing here? Did you follow us?" "Look, buddy, the valet parking is outside. The staff entrance is in the back." The group around him chuckled nervously. Jenna went pale. Her hand gripped Tyler's arm. "Alex, please," she whispered. "Just go. Do not make a scene." "I am not here to make a scene, Jenna," I said calmly. I kept my hands clasped loosely in front of me. "I am just here to congratulate Tyler on his diversified portfolio." Tyler stepped forward, invading my personal space. He smelled of scotch and aggression. "I do not know what kind of sad stalker game you are playing, soldier boy, but you have 5 seconds to walk away before I have security throw you out into the rain." I didn't blink. I held his gaze. "I was just wondering, Tyler, does the Sales Leader of the Year award include the revenue generated from Apex Strategic Consulting? Or is that income kept separate for tax purposes in Nevada?" The effect was instantaneous. The color drained from Tyler's face so fast it looked like a medical event. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by the primal fear of a man realizing his cover has been blown. "What?" he stammered. "What did you say?" "Apex," I repeated, enunciating clearly. "The shell company, the upcoded invoices, the kickbacks. It is a very impressive operation. Clumsy, but impressive." You don't know what you're talking about," he hissed, his eyes darting to the people around us. But the silence was spreading. The people closest to us had stopped drinking. They were listening. Then, the secondary detonation occurred. A phone chimed in the pocket of a vice president standing to my left, then another. Then a murmur started at the back of the room, rolling forward like a tide. I saw the Virotech chief compliance officer, a stern woman in a gray suit, look at her BlackBerry. Her eyes widened. She looked up, scanned the room, and locked eyes with Tyler. The look she gave him was not one of concern. It was the look of a surgeon deciding to amputate a gangrenous limb. "Oh my God," someone whispered near the stage. "It is on the news." Jenna pulled her phone from her clutch. Her hands were shaking. She stared at the screen, her mouth falling open. "Tyler," she whispered. "Tyler?" Why is your picture on the Seattle Times website? The room began to dissolve into chaos. The polite veneer of corporate civility shattered. People were backing away from Tyler, creating a physical quarantine zone around him. He spun around, looking for an exit, looking for an ally. There were none. "This is a mistake," Tyler shouted, his voice cracking. "This is slander. I will sue." The double doors at the main entrance swung open. 3 men entered. They were not hotel security. They wore navy windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. HHS, OIG, federal agents. Behind them were 2 uniformed police officers. The music stopped. The room went dead silent. The lead agent scanned the room, his face impassive. He spotted Tyler. He walked straight through the crowd, which parted like the Red Sea. Tyler looked at me. His eyes were wide, pleading, terrified. He looked like a child who had broken something expensive. "Alex, what did you do?" I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I moved slowly, so the agents would not think I was reaching for a weapon. I pulled out the $1 bill. I stepped into the space between us. Tyler was frozen, paralyzed by the collapse of his reality. I reached out and tucked the dollar bill neatly into the breast pocket of his midnight blue tuxedo. I patted it gently. "You threw this at me," I said softly, my voice perfectly steady. "You said it was a tip. Keep it. You are going to need it for a lawyer." I turned to Jenna. She was standing frozen, looking from Tyler to the agents and then to me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but mostly, they were filled with a dawning, horrific realization. She saw the man she left me for the high-value man crumbling into a pile of criminal liability. She looked at me, perhaps waiting for me to save her, to tell her it was okay. I gave her a single curt nod. It was not a nod of forgiveness. It was a nod of dismissal. "Mr. Blake," the agent said, stepping up behind Tyler, "we have a warrant for your arrest regarding wire fraud and violations of the federal anti-kickback statute. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. I did not stay to watch them drag him out. The mission was accomplished. The target was neutralized. I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit, moving against the flow of the shocked crowd. I walked past the frozen executives, past the whispering waiters, and out of the ballroom. I walked out into the cool night air of Seattle. I took a deep breath. It tasted like rain and ozone. My pulse was 60 beats per minute. Steady. Behind me, the noise of the scandal was just beginning. But out here in the silence, I was free. In the military, the mission does not end when the target is neutralized. It ends after the after-action report is filed, the equipment is cleaned, and the extraction is complete. The weeks following the gala at the Fairmont were a masterclass in controlled demolition. I did not need to do anything else. I simply sat back and watched gravity take over. The fallout was total. It started with the headlines. The Seattle Times, the Wall Street Journal, and every industry blog ran the story. Medical tech, giant Virotech, raided by feds in multi-state kickback probe. Virotech's stock price plummeted 20% in 48 hours. The board of directors scrambled to distance themselves, issuing statements about rogue employees and zero tolerance. But the damage was structural. Then came the asset forfeiture. I watched from a distance, literally and digitally. I saw the photos on social media of tow trucks hauling away Tyler's leased Porsche and his Range Rover. I read the court filings that detailed the freezing of his bank accounts. The wealth he had flashed at the bar, the stack of cash he had used to humiliate me, was revealed for what it was. A house of cards built on stolen tax dollars. Tyler Blake wasn't just unemployed, he was radioactive. He was facing 10 to 15 years in federal prison. The man who treated waiters like furniture was now the property of the Bureau of Prisons. And then, there was Jenna. For 2 weeks, she was silent. I imagined she was busy answering questions from federal agents, explaining why her name was on flight manifests paid for by a shell company under criminal investigation. She wasn't charged, she was too ignorant of the scheme to be a conspirator, but she was socially bankrupt. The high-value circle she wanted to join promptly exiled her. To them, she was just the accessory to a disaster. On a rainy Tuesday night, 3 weeks after the arrest, my phone vibrated. I was at the gym, midway through a set of deadlifts. The bar was loaded to 400 pounds. The iron felt cold and honest in my hands. I set the weight down with a heavy clang and checked the screen. "Incoming call," Jenna. I stared at the name. A month ago, seeing that name would have triggered a dopamine spike. It would have meant hope. Now, it just looked like spam. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. A minute later, a text appeared. Alex, please pick up. I don't know what to do. They took everything. Tyler lied to me. I didn't know. I miss you. I miss us. Can we just talk? Please. I read the message twice. I analyzed it for sincerity. I found none. I found only survival instinct. She wasn't calling because she realized she loved me. She was calling because the yacht had sunk, and I was the only life raft she knew. She wanted the safety she had mocked. She wanted the boring stability she had left for $1. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the urge to text back a witty retort or a paragraph of, I told you so. That is what emotional people do. I simply pressed block caller. I watched the name disappear from my notifications. I deleted the thread. I put the phone back in my bag, reshocked my hands, and gripped the bar. I pulled the weight up. It was heavy, but I could carry it. The following week, I received a different kind of communication. I was invited to a coffee meeting in a nondescript office building in downtown Seattle. The signage on the door was minimal. Greystone Risk Analytics. The man across the table was older, ex-CIA, wearing a suit that cost money but didn't scream about it. He didn't ask me about my resume. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a printout of the link chart. I had built the one tracking Tyler's shell companies. We know you were the source behind the HHS tip, the man said quietly. We represent a consortium of insurance companies. We look for patterns that others miss. We don't care about the news. We care about the signal. You have a talent for silence, Mr. Carter. He pushed a contract across the table. The starting salary was double what I made at the fintech company. No public credit, he warned. You will never be famous. You will never get an award at a gala. You will just be the guy who knows things. I don't need applause, I said, picking up the pen. I prefer the quiet. 6 months later. My life is back to a routine, but it is an upgraded operating system. I wake up at 0500. I run 6 miles along the waterfront. The air is cold, the city is asleep, and I am alone. I don't go to bars like the Vault. I don't try to impress people who judge worth by the brand of a watch. I live in a slightly nicer apartment now, one with a view of the Sound, but my furniture is still simple. My car is still reliable. I sat down at my desk this morning to pay bills. I logged into my bank account. The balance is growing steadily, boringly, honestly. There are no shell companies, no fraud, no fear that a knock at the door means the end of my life. I thought about that dollar bill, the one Tyler flicked in my face, the one I carried as a talisman of hate until I tucked it into his pocket at the moment of his destruction. He thought that dollar defined me. He thought it was a price tag. He was wrong. It was a mirror. It showed me that his value was printed on paper, while mine was forged in discipline. He chased the flash, the noise, the quick dopamine hit of appearing successful. He shouted his existence to the world until the world shouted back. I closed my laptop and looked out the window at the rain falling on the city. In a world that can't stop screaming, the most dangerous thing you can be is the man who sits quietly in the corner, watching, listening, and waiting. They chased the noise. I controlled the silence. And silence always wins. This story wasn't just about revenge. It was about the dignity of remaining true to yourself when the world tries to make you feel small. Alex showed us that true value isn't found in a loud voice or a flashy watch, but in the quiet discipline of integrity and the strength to walk away from people who don't respect you. In a world that constantly rewards noise, never forget that your silence and your skills are your most powerful weapons. If this story of cold justice and self-worth resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to Secret Lovers for more emotional dramas. I want to hear your voice in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated by someone arrogant? And how did you handle it? Share your story below and tell me which province or state you are watching from. I love seeing how far our community reaches. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.